The Boca Raton Historical Society and Museum, founded in 1972, is a nonprofit membership organization dedicated to preserving the past to enrich the future. The Historical Society is building a legacy in our community by collecting and sharing our local history. The current project is documenting the Jewish history of Boca Raton.
My name is Susan Podolsky, and I moved to Boca Raton with my husband Barry and our two children, Brian and Gail, in 1987.
And I am Sandy Altner, and I am very happy to have you here today, Susan Podolsky. I am a volunteer interviewer with the Boca Raton Historical Society and Museum, and today is November 18th, 2015. We are at Lynn University in the Communications Department, and we are in the studios provided here, and we are very grateful that Lynn is able to help us on this project. And we're very grateful that you are also able to come and join us and tell us your stories today. Susan, what brought you and Barry to South Florida?
Well, it's interesting. Barry and I came from very close-knit families. Our grandparents were very much part and parcel of our lives. Except the day after we were married in Chicago, we moved to Seattle, Washington because Barry was working on his master's degree. And we loved it so much that we wound up staying there for 3 years. And then we looked at each other and said, do we want to have children? Well, we weren't sure, but we thought we did. But the thought of raising our children without having their grandparents near them was not settling well. And so Barry asked the company with whom he was working, which was a public accounting company, if he could transfer to the Miami office. And I figured I was teaching, so I could get a job anywhere. And we came to Miami. And the reason that we settled in Miami was because of Barry's job. It was interesting because we first looked to move to South Miami because everybody in the Miami office at Touche Ross said, that's where the Jewish community lives. And that was one thing that we were looking for. Barry and I grew up in a very close-knit Jewish community in Skokie, Illinois. We actually met when we were 16 years old by virtue of the work that we did in our youth group. And so being within a Jewish community and participating in a Jewish community and helping a Jewish community to thrive was very important to us, as well as choosing the right synagogue.
So I'm going to interrupt you there because first of all, there are so many interesting things that we can talk about, but I first of all want to know what Jewish life was in your family when you were growing up so we can get a sense of where you came from and what you found when you got here.
Okay. I grew up in a conservative home. Actually, the only difference between my home and if I had grown up as an Orthodox Jew was really the fact that in our synagogue, men and women sat together. But for all other practical purposes, I had a very conservative, traditional upbringing. Holidays were celebrated with the entire family, mostly when I was very young at my grandmother's house. She was your typical Jewish bubby cook, and then eventually as she aged, my mother did it. And my mother and father were very involved in our synagogue. My mother was the Oneg Shabbat chairwoman. So we were there every Friday night going to services. So it was only natural that I became involved in the youth group. However, my Jewish education, because it was a conservative temple, I could have been bat mitzvahed on a Friday night. My parents didn't believe in that because I was a woman or girl. And so I went the confirmation route. And the only difference between my education and that of a young man was the fact that I'd never learned to read from Torah. But I learned everything about holidays and ethics and laws and how to read Hebrew and prayers, etc., but nothing regarding Torah. So it was something that I always felt that I missed, actually. And when I was 50, I rectified that.
How did you do that?
Well, the year, about 6 months before I turned 50, I looked at Barry and I said, so, my 50th birthday is on a Saturday. How nice. I think I want a bat mitzvah. He goes, I think that's a great idea. So I went to talk to Rabbi Singer, who was, at that point, our head rabbi at Temple Bethel, and he said, great. Why don't you join the bat mitzvah class? And he knew that I could read Hebrew. He knew that I had a very strong Jewish upbringing and education. And I said, I'm happy to join the synagogue class, but I really want to study. and I really want one-on-one, and I want to delve deeper into the tradition and the laws and the ethics. I want to be able to dissect the Torah and find true meaning, all the things that I missed when I was growing up. He said, great. So I'm going to introduce you to our new junior rabbi. His name is Rabbi Dan Levin, and I think that he will take you on as his student. And Rabbi Levin did, and we met once a week for that 6-month period, so that by the time July 14th came along, I could lead the entire service, and I had my Bat Mitzvah as a Havdalah service in the chapel at Temple Beth El with my family and friends. My mother was there. My father-in-law was there. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law and my dad had already passed. Cousins flew in from Chicago. I mean, I felt like it was a true celebration, and I felt like it was a validation of my participation as a Jewish woman. And I will never forget it. And I am so grateful to Rabbi Singer and most of all, Rabbi Levin.
That is a beautiful story. So now we're going to have to go back in time a little bit to you and Barry arriving in Miami. And so you had explained that Miami was the choice because this is where Barry's job was. What was it that you found in a Jewish community in Miami in 1987?
76.
In 1976.
We moved to Boca in 87.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
So in 1976, we were still pretty young, no children. We decided not to move to the Kendall area. We looked very carefully, but we came down to look at homes over the Christmas holidays. So it was very easy to discern who was Jewish and who was not by virtue of the Christmas decorations and the wreaths on the door. And I looked at Barry and I said, you know, the one thing that I missed in Seattle was living in a Jewish community, because Skokie, Illinois, at that point was one of the strongest, most populated Jewish communities in the United States. When we were growing up, Skokie had more Holocaust survivors than even in Israel. I mean, it was a very strong, tight-knit Jewish community. So then we came to North Miami Beach, which was also a very strong-knit Jewish community. And we bought a home, and we started looking at synagogues. That was our first segue. We looked at conservative first because that was how we grew up. But we didn't feel comfortable there. We didn't feel engaged. We didn't feel that we were welcomed. Well, as it turned out, 2 blocks from our home, I could walk to the Reform Synagogue, and it was a whole different experience. And after I especially got over the organ, the choir, the pews instead of individual seats, and feeling that I was in a synagogue and not a church, I quickly realized that the Reform movement was resonating to me in terms of the participation in social action, the fact that our synagogue was going to open a Reform Jewish day school, which I hoped that eventually our children would attend, and they did. There was a strong nursery school. There was a young component to the congregation, and we quickly became involved. We also became involved in the JCC and in the Federation in the Miami community. So we went to classes, we went to social events, we went to fundraising events. Eventually, Barry became, for a short time, the director of the Michael and Russell JCC, which completely transformed our lives. Our friendship base was totally revolving around the synagogue. We were involved in a chavarah, and we were happy. And it was a great place to raise our children and role model the kind of behavior that we hoped and the kind of lives that they would lead as Jewish adults down the road.
Are you talking about volunteerism?
Volunteerism, yes. Yes, volunteerism and synagogue and federation and Jewish communal action. We needed to move when Barry's job changed, and he was offered a position to open several dealerships in the Delray area. And my husband's a workaholic.
Dealerships?
Dealerships, auto dealerships. And he's a workaholic, and he was working very long hours, and we had very young children. They were in 1st grade and 3rd grade, Yes, first grade and third grade. And I looked at him and I said, I don't want to move. Our life is here. Our friends are here. My mother is here. His parents were in Pompano, so that it didn't matter if we moved up into here, we would be equidistant. I said, we can't go on like this because we're a family and we're not seeing you enough. And that's really what brought us to Boca Raton. But because we were so involved in our synagogue and in Federation, we did our homework in advance. And so not only did I come up here looking for homes, I came up here looking for synagogues and interviewing rabbis and meeting congregants at the area synagogues to be sure that once we settled, we would be happy with the synagogue that we chose.
And where did that lead? This was then now in 1987.
87. Mm-hmm.
So your children were small and you moved to Boca and you chose Temple Bethel for what reason?
We felt a warm welcome, especially by the clergy. I also felt when I met with our junior rabbi at the time, who was Rabbi Greg Marks, actually, I think a cousin of Rabbi Singer, and he said to me, "Welcome to Disneyland." And I looked at him and I went, it's funny that you mention that because all of my friends in North Miami Beach think that when I move to Boca, I'm going to change. And the genuine soul that they knew in North Miami Beach is going to become a Boca beauty. And I kept saying, no. I'm going to seek friends like you, and I'm going to seek people that are like myself. So now you're telling me I'm moving to Disneyland? And he said, yes, but that doesn't mean that you are going to change. And if you carry with you the ethics by which you've lived, and you lead your life Jewishly and with purpose, you will not change. And you will raise your family with the same resolve that you raised them before this. And I will never forget that. When I met with other synagogues, I didn't find that those impactful statements that I did at Bethel. No sooner did I meet with Rabbi Marks, Rabbi Singer was out of town, he called us from wherever he was to welcome us to the congregation, even though we hadn't joined yet. That was the kind of welcome I needed to feel comfortable, and I didn't feel it from the other clergy, and that's how we settled at Bethel, and we never looked back.
When you first came with Barry to Boca Raton, did you find there was a difference in the Jewish community here from what you had been accustomed to in Miami?
Oh, yes. The Jewish community in Boca was much smaller in 1987 than it was today. If I went to East Boca, I would be hard-pressed to find a delicatessen, a bagel. I can remember looking with our realtor, who actually happened to be a member of Temple Bethel, and she was touring me around Boca, and we were on Federal Highway, and we passed by Royal Palm Country Club and residences. And I said, so why aren't we looking here for homes? This looks like a nice area. And she said, Susan, you're not wanted there. I said, what? This is 1987. How could you be saying that? Just trust me. Now, I never felt a feeling of anti-Semitism, even in the early stages of when we lived in Boca Raton, but I did feel that Jews at that point were kind of West related, and that the Jews felt more comfortable in the western areas of Boca Raton. Jog Road West, I-95 West. I can also remember looking in Mission Bay for homes, and there was nothing there. The area was just being built, and I said to Barry, I'm not a pioneer. I'm sorry, I can't live this far west. And so we settled more central Boca, Jog and Powerline, and not too far from the Federation, not too far from Bethel. There was no Federation campus then. It was, the Federation campus was on Spanish River in what used to be a church. There was the JCC and the Federation offices. The day school was in a small building on Northeast 4th Avenue. The building's now since been torn down. Even though our children were in day school in Miami, because we were new to the area and I felt it was important for them to socialize, And I don't know if it was the right decision or the wrong decision, but we decided to send them to public school so they'd have the chance to meet more children, because at that time, the day school only had one class in each grade and the classes were really small. We became involved in the temple. By the time I was in the second year, I was serving on committees, mostly in education because that was my background. We became involved in the Young Leadership Division at Federation. We served on committees. Barry was actually the campaign chair for several years at Young Leadership. He was accepted in the Wexner program, so I was privy to the education that was offered to spouses through the Wexner program. I will be eternally grateful.
Could you describe what the Wexner program is, please?
Sure, and Barry probably will be able to describe it even better. So the Wexner program is funded by Leslie Wexner, who decided many years ago that, yes, his name is on lots of buildings, and it continues to be on lots of buildings, but what he really wanted to do was to develop leadership. And he felt that to develop leadership, leaders have to be educated, and that leaders have to make decisions based on ethics and not just the purse strings and the pockets and the budgets. And so the Wexner program taught Jewish leaders, and the selection process was very vigorous. Barry was so honored to be selected. It was a 2-year program. Went to class every week and then every other week, and there was professors and scholars were flown in from around the world to teach the students. There were 2 retreats a year to which spouses were invited, and we also went to seminars, and it changed my life in terms of the people that I met and the education that I received, and I'll never forget it.
With the many causes that you've been involved with here in this community, one of the biggest of them would have been in the 1990s, the Russian Resettlement program, and you were the director of that. And 150 families, as I understand, were involved in that. Could you tell me a little bit about where that came from and how you got involved?
Actually, it's interesting that you're asking me this question after we discussed the Wexner program, because in 1989, we were in, I believe it was Snowmass for our retreat, and the address by Leslie Wexner to the 500 participants was about Pidyon Shavuim, which is the Jewish mission to rescue the captive. And he challenged every group from every community that was represented to go back to our own communities. And if there wasn't a Russian resettlement program yet, he said, the floodgates have opened. Russian Jews are now leaving, and they need homes. And yes, Israel is taking them in. Not all of them want to go to Israel, and Israel can't do the job alone. And so it is our responsibility within our communities to rescue the captive and provide homes and education and Jewish life to the Russian Jews who probably don't even know what it means to be a Jew. So why did this resonate to me and to Barry? In 1981, we were at Yom Kippur services at Temple Sinai in North Dade, where we were members, and the rabbi's sermon was about Russian Jewry. And he charged the congregation to think about going to the former Soviet Union and giving refuseniks, those Russian Jews who were refused exit visas by the government, hope, and to bring back information about them so that the Council on Soviet Jewry in the United States, the National Conference on Soviet Jewry in the United States, could continue logging this information and lobbying Washington to ensure the fact that Russian Jews were not going to be forgotten and that the United States was going to fight for their freedom. Well, when we heard Les Wexner in 1989 give this address, we said to all of our Wexner participants, we can't be silent. And so I remember that we came back and we had a meeting of all the participants and spouses, and we all said, we have to go to Federation and we have to plea our case. And if need be, we will give the seed money to start this project, because we knew that the Federation was raising money to build the new campus, and budgets were tight, and the Jewish community was not what it was today. And we needed to come up with not only the rationale, but also the seed money to prove that this was an effort that we were backing with our resolve and with our dollars. And so we met with Rabbi Bruce Warshel and the leaders of Federation, and they couldn't turn us down. And in the beginning, I worked in the program as a volunteer.
What year was that, more or less?
It started in '89, and we took in our first families in 1989, and then it really blossomed in 1990. By 1990, the refugees were coming in, and we decided as a community that our goal was to help families reunite, even though we understood that it would not be easy, because many of the younger families wanted to bring in their elderly parents. And these were people that were not going to be able to work, were going to find it difficult to learn the language, that might be ill, et cetera, et cetera. But we wanted families to be reunited. We also, I have to tell you, we realized it was going to be difficult, but I don't think we truly realized how little infrastructure the South Palm Beach County community had compared to larger cities that had public transportation and job training programs and HIAS offices and so on and so forth. And that we were going to need a very strong cadre of volunteers, and we got them.
Tell me what was exactly involved in this. When you say resettlement, where did those people go when they got here?
Okay. So the first thing we did was we employed the services of hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, and we trained them. And I was originally the volunteer coordinator, and then as the program grew, the director of Jewish Family Service, Spencer Gellert, and I were going to a meeting that was being hosted by HIAS in Miami, and he said, I need to find a director for the program. I can't run the agency and run this program. And I looked at him, we were in his car, and I said, so who do you have in mind? Who are we going to interview? And he said, oh, I've selected the person already. I said, and who might that be? He said, it's you. Well, I think I fell on the floor of the car. And I said, Spencer, I don't have a social work degree. He said, you don't need one. I've seen what you can do. It's not a problem. So I went out to every Jewish organization in the Boca del Rey area, calling for volunteers, calling for used furniture, calling for used clothing, calling for used cars, and train these volunteers to work with our families. So we would get a notification from HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, who was in communication with Ladispoli, Italy. So what was happening was the Russian immigrants were going to Ladispoli, and they were either flying to Israel or being held in Ladispoli until a community asked for them to come over, and that community would support them, pledge to support them. And that we had the choice of reading bios and trying to determine which families we felt would do well in the Boca del Rey area in terms of, did they have any English? Were they professionals? Did we think that we would be able to find them a job? And, a lot of it was guesswork, I have to tell you, but we did the best we could. The families were met at the airport by their volunteers. So what we did was we attached anywhere, depending on how large the family was, anywhere between 5 and 12 volunteer host families with each family that came over. These families drove them to doctor's appointments, drove them to the grocery, drove them to their English as a second language classes, and on and on and on.
And where did the families stay?
They had apartments. So the Federation sponsored them with stipends for 3 months that covered their rent and their minimal food allotments. They also then applied for help from the federal government, which they were privy to as refugees in terms of food stamps and medical care. I went out with the help of various volunteer doctors and dentists to solicit doctors and dentists throughout the community to offer free medical care for 1 year, sometimes to a family and sometimes to one individual, depending on what the health situation was of that individual.
And what kind of response did you get?
It was unbelievably positive and receptive. I have never experienced anything like this in my life. I think what resonated in this community was the fact that we all were students in Hebrew school and studied what happened in the Holocaust and how little was done to resettle refugees while the Holocaust was going on. Afterward, yes. And we knew that this was our chance to make a statement. I had women going to clean apartments, which we were able to get at very low rent from various apartment owners in the community. And some of the apartments were within walking distance to the English as a second language classes, which were offered by the county, which was great. I had women coming from country club communities who hadn't cleaned their own houses in probably 20 years with their rubber gloves. They were the same women that came with balloons to the airport. And my favorite question always was, well, Susan, how am I going to recognize them when they get off the plane? And, I mean, I was there, but I mean, we didn't have pictures. We knew their names. And I said, trust me, they will be wearing winter overcoats. They will be looking disheveled. They may not have slept in 24 hours. Their suitcases will probably look as if they were 30 years old, and they will be holding hands and looking very frightened. You won't miss them. And from the moment they arrived, the volunteers greeted them with hugs and kisses, and those volunteers became their surrogate families. They're the ones that took them to the grocery store to teach them about how to shop in an American grocery store. And one of my favorite stories was a volunteer called me and said, okay, we took the family to the grocery store, and they filled up their cart, dropped it off at the front, and went to get another cart. And I went up to them and I said, what are you doing? And they said, well, we have to buy more. And they said, no, what you have in your cart is enough for the week, but it may not be here next week. Because that was what they were used to. That was the lifestyle from which they came. And it was an incredible education process for our volunteers. Every synagogue opened its doors and offered free memberships. We had a wedding at Temple Bethel that was officiated by our rabbis and cantors for any family that wanted to have a Jewish ceremony. We had urologists and the hospitals volunteer their time and their ORs to perform brit, even on adult males who wanted a brit because they did not have that luxury in the former Soviet Union. This was a full-scale effort to not only resettle people and offer them economic stability and help them retrain and retool for the future, but also offer them the opportunity to develop their Jewish identities. And compared to larger cities, I know we did that really well because of the mass efforts of volunteers. And I'm very proud of this community for that.
And what happened to all those families?
I think a total of 3 families moved away because of job opportunities. All of the children went on to college, and some of them went on to Ivy League schools on full scholarship, and now they're having babies. Some of them are in the nursery school at Temple Bethel and Congregation B'nai Israel and Congregation B'nai Torah, sorry. They are all economically independent. We did lose several to cancer. That was the result, we believe, of Chernobyl and the widespread effects of the radiation things that we didn't necessarily expect. Some of the seniors are no longer with us because of the aging, the natural aging process. But the families, to this day, are eternally grateful. We have one family whose son flew on Air Force One with President Clinton as his translator because while he was at college in Washington, D.C., he served as a White House intern. And today, he still lives in Washington, D.C. He's married. His second child was just named by a rabbi whose mother worked in the Russian resettlement program with me. Her name is Linda Hurst. She is now at Federation. And Aaron Alexander officiated at Alex's child's baby naming. Both Alex and his brother were B'nai Mitzvah at Temple Bethel. His father and another woman, Anna Ostrovsky, went through the retraining process for dentists in Gainesville. They had to leave their family. With the help of our federation, we took care of the family while they could be retrained, and today they're dentists. This didn't happen in all the communities. We're very proud and very glad that our immigrants who are now, and they're all citizens, and very proud to be citizens, and there was never a prouder moment than when I took them to immigration to submit all their paperwork.
Was that, so now we have this Russian community that has stayed here in Boca. When we look at that, the mosaic of what is the Jewish community here, we have different immigrants who are coming now. Has the community learned from that experience in a way that has made a permanent change in our community, do you think, from the Russian resettlement program? What have been the lasting effects on the families who have been the volunteers in that? And has that changed in terms of their flexibility to other immigrants coming at this time?
Many of the volunteers that were assigned to families are still in touch with the families. And every once in a while, I hear from them. They will never forget the positive experience that they had. I can't honestly say that any of them have helped other refugees resettle since then. And I can't speak for others in terms of how they might feel regarding refugees who are coming in today. However, I know that at Temple Bethel, for example, with our Giving Tree and our Social Action Committee, we are committed to helping anybody in need who wants to come to Boca Raton and have a better life, whether it be helping them to celebrate Hanukkah or Christmas, offering clothing, helping with jobs. We're also involved with Family Promise to help people who have lost their jobs, and many of them are immigrants who have come across hard times. I would hope that our experience with Russian resettlement might help our community should our community decide to resettle Syrian refugees. It may be a little different. I know that there's a lot of fear out there. I don't know what our state's going to do based on recent turnabouts in the news. But I would hope that the Jewish community will always remember the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuim. That is our responsibility to rescue the captive, and these people were captives in their own country.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we very much appreciate you coming in and telling us that story, and to give us the opportunity for future generations to hear it from you. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. It's something I'm very proud of, something I always want to talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.